The Jewish Channel's Week in Review. Awarding $1 million to Michael Bloomberg and explaining why, Dr. Ruth's life story brought to the stage, expanding an old Jewish institution in a new way, and more of the Jewish news that's changing your world right now in this episode of the Week in Review. Hello and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. It's far too early to be thinking about the 2016 presidential election, but that means it's just early enough for candidates to lay down a track record on which to campaign. That's largely seen as the reason for the visit to Israel by Texas Governor Rick Perry and Nevada Governor Brian Sandoval, two Republicans expected to campaign for their party's nomination in 2016. It was more than just a campaign stop for Perry. He was also there to announce a planned campus for Texas A&M University in Nazareth. But the federal government we have in the U.S. today is the one working on issues like Iran sanctions and negotiations over its nuclear development program. Last week saw the first negotiations since the election of new Iranian President Hassan Rouhani. While leaks and statements from those negotiations have been quite limited, the overall impression of what information has been revealed is that the talks were quite productive and that the U.S. felt Iran was ready to make serious movement toward bringing its nuclear program in line with what international leaders want. On only the negotiations' second day, Secretary of State John Kerry became directly involved, which is widely seen as indicative of the possibility that the negotiations were far closer to reaching agreement than had been predicted. Meantime, here in the U.S., the potential to roll back some or all of the sanctions against Iran will involve domestic as well as international negotiations. Treasury Secretary Jack Lew gave some sign of what the terms for that domestic negotiation could be in an appearance on NBC's Meet the Press, saying that, quote, "We need to see rolling back their nuclear program, and I can tell you that when the time comes, when those movements come, any changes to sanctions will be proportionate." Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu offered a different opinion on the same show, saying that achieving an agreement with Iran and removing sanctions had to be an all-or-nothing deal.
There are a lot of countries that are waiting for a signal, just waiting for a signal to get rid of their sanctions regime. And I think you don't want to go through halfway measures.
An additional point of disagreement between the U.S. and Israel, it seems, will be in determining what kind of nuclear capacity Iran will be allowed to maintain. Netanyahu says no nuclear capacity should be allowed in Iran, but the U.S. and other Western countries have suggested that the capacity only to produce nuclear electrical power in Iran should be allowed. But when it comes to skepticism about giving things away, the attitude of young Jews to Jewish organizations and leading Jewish philanthropists is usually quite cynical. Hoping to generate more interest in Judaism among today's youth is the Genesis Prize Foundation, which it hopes to create what it calls a version of a Jewish Nobel Prize, awarding $1 million to a recipient each year who embodies Jewish values and who can inspire others to such involvement. The awarding of the inaugural $1 million Genesis Prize to billionaire and New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg, however, might have generated more such cynicism among Jewish youth than the organization expected. Response on Twitter and Facebook seemed to range from confusion to anger. Writing in the New Republic, Mark Tracy headlined his article, "Michael Bloomberg just won more money than you'll make in a decade," and declared that the philanthropic priorities of many of the best-funded Jewish organizations warps the Jewish community, calling the award one more step in the gross exaltation of wealth. Genesis Prize Foundation President Wayne Firestone stopped by TJC Studios on the day of the announcement to discuss the prize. Here are the highlights. You're talking about the Facebook reaction and so forth to your to the announcement of the prize. I'll tell you, from what I've seen online so far, I've seen more confusion and cynicism. I've seen from people in the Jewish arts, from people in Jewish media, and so on and so forth, who are wondering, across these various matrices for making this decision in terms of inspiring youth, getting people more involved in Jewish activism, that there's a question of how does Michael Bloomberg represent a model for them, in the sense of, here's a man who went and earned many billions of dollars, then used several hundred millions of those dollars to run for election and re-election. That obviously that's not a very easy thing to do. It's not something that's accessible, or not something that could serve as a marker for someone of how they could judge the progress in their life.
Right. On the one hand, there's a part of the public narrative that certainly views Mr. Bloomberg as just a very wealthy guy, as you said, from business. On the other hand, there's a part of his narrative that is less well known and equally, if not more importantly, part of what we intend to share over the course of the year. The fact that the mayor took $1 a day and spent his time trying to improve the city, and that today New Yorkers live 35 months a year longer, and that poverty is down by 25%, and that public housing has increased by $7.5 billion, the largest of anywhere in the country. Those are very tangible accomplishments that affect real people and their lives. When you look for impact in terms of, again, private sector, public sector, and philanthropy, I think a big part of what we saw in the narrative that we want to share that distinguished the mayor is his intention to really improve the quality of life of people on a very large and grand scale. So we want that to be part of the discussion. The second aspect of this, I think also, is where and what he intends to do with his philanthropy. This is someone who has modeled what we in the Jewish community have said is so critical of thinking about how to give back.
But again, each one of those things that you cited, again, for young people in America today, or for people trying to engage in activism or cultural work in the Jewish community, each one of those things seems uniquely unachievable for almost any other individual, in the sense that, I mean, being mayor and working for $1 a day is simply inaccessible to 90+% of the American citizens. Giving great amounts through philanthropic effort is also inaccessible, and becoming mayor by spending great sums of money is inaccessible. So in what sense is that meant to inspire them towards specific activity?
Well, we were at a press conference earlier this morning with the mayor. We were inside actually a parking and maintenance facility for police cars. And what was interesting was seeing the different agencies that were called together, there was 8 different agencies that are now working together on a transportation fleet. And what was interesting in the mayor's answer to reporters talking about the particular program that he was introducing was suggesting that the biggest challenge that one usually faces, whether in the private sector or the public sector, is just getting people to cooperate and work together. And so I think from an executive leadership perspective, as we think in the nonprofit world, as we think in the communal world, as we think larger about solving big issues in society related to health, I think there is something that we can learn. And I think there is something about this idea of having impact in a particular area that is going to resonate with managers, with leaders, and frankly with citizens around the world who, let's say, are used to bad governance. I think that affects individuals. I think changing that in different places in the world will be something that will be part of his legacy.
You can see the full interview with Wayne Firestone in the Interviews category under TJC Original Series on the Jewish Channel On Demand on cable. Moving on, Dr. Ruth Westheimer is most famously known for her role as the nation's sex therapist in a long-running TV show. She was also a sniper fighting for Israel's independence, a Holocaust survivor, and a single mother. Her life story is being portrayed by one of the most famous moms in television history, that 70s show's Deborah Jo Rupp. Meredith Gansman reports.
You've seen her on television, you've heard her on the radio, but now Dr. Ruth is playing off-Broadway. It's Becoming Dr. Ruth, starring Deborah Jo Rupp.
You didn't say we should think about sex.
We should think about sex.
It's a little daunting because she's quite a spirit.
That 4'7" spirit, Dr. Ruth Westheimer, known for talking on the air about, well, you know, has a larger-than-life story that's told in Becoming Dr. Ruth. Its star, Deborah Jo Rupp, is best known from that 70s show.
When I see Deborah Jo Rupp play me, I have to pinch myself, say keep quiet, because that's not you on stage, that's Deborah Jo Rupp. She plays me beautifully.
We're both short and we both march everywhere, and we speak quickly, and it's a spirit that you want to invest in.
Westheimer was born in Germany in 1928. In 1939, she escaped the Holocaust via a kindertransport to Switzerland. Her parents were both killed during the war.
Because I was saved and 1,500,000 Jewish children died, I have an obligation for Tikkun Olam.
At 17, Westheimer emigrated to Palestine, joining the Haganah, a Zionist paramilitary organization, as a sniper. But you probably know her best for her several books on human sexuality and her many years on the radio and television.
Young men to be married.
Did you know that I was engaged?
No.
Okay, I was engaged.
She said her openness about sex comes from what some might feel a surprising source.
Everybody knows. I talk for the world at large, but it's based on my being very Jewish. Sex has never been a sin. Sex has always been a mitzvah, an obligation of a couple, not just picking up somebody in the street.
Right. In seeing Deborah Jo Rupp portray Dr. Ruth on stage, audiences may have a hard time telling who's who.
Well, they love her from this show. Oh my God, I cannot believe I'm crying. I'm not even that tired. It's the kind of show that you get very caught up in. And I think sometimes they forget that I'm not Dr. Ruth, so they get very, very emotionally involved in it.
To see more from Dr. Ruth and Deborah Jo Rupp in Becoming Dr. Ruth, tune into the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Meredith. While many studies show that the non-Orthodox Jewish population is leaving organized Judaism behind and that Jewish institutions overall are shrinking, Christian Needham found one institution that's growing precisely to serve that non-Orthodox population.
Jewish life in Williamsburg, Brooklyn usually brings to mind the timeless black hats and beards of the Hasidic Satmar community in low-rise housing south of the Williamsburg Bridge. But the neighborhood north of the bridge is in the midst of a modern high-rise development boom, bringing with it non-Orthodox Jews moving into North Williamsburg and the neighboring neighborhood of Greenpoint. According to the UJA Federation of New York, there are 13,000 such Jews, and the Kings Bay YMYWHA is reaching out to serve them with a new annex at 14 Hope Street in Williamsburg. Following its opening in late September, the Jewish Channel paid a visit to the new annex and spoke with its director, Daniel Zeltzer.
We see a lot of families, a lot of 20s and 30s, a lot of just people from the community who are really not engaged in the Jewish community and really have no other outposts. For them, synagogues are not the way that they choose to engage. And we really view ourselves as an entity that is going to create the Jewish memories for them and that is going to give them what we really call the Jewish experience.
That Jewish experience begins from a young age with an on-site preschool.
Well, we just started out with one class. It's 2- and 3-year-olds. We are a progressive school. We're based on Bank Street Reggio philosophies. And so when you walk into our classroom, it's an incredibly loving and caring space for children and families.
The preschool offers children a multi-sensory and multicultural Jewish experience with unique programs.
One of them is called J-Yam and Hum, and it's a program that really explores engagement for kids with Judaism through food and through music and through dance from different country. So every week they travel to, let's say, a different country. You know, today they're in Africa and learning from what Jewish life is like there, and tomorrow they're in Yemen, and the day after is they're in Germany, and so on and so forth.
The annex also reaches out to older Jews in their 20s and 30s who reside in Williamsburg and Greenpoint. So far, the annex has engaged families with 2 large-scale holiday programs.
One was for Rosh Hashanah, and we didn't do it in our space. We have a tendency to go out into the community and to really kind of meet them where they're at.
To see more about the new Kings Bay Y Annex in Williamsburg, please tune into the full broadcast edition of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Christian. That's all for this week from all of us here at the Jewish Channel. Be well. Jewish Channel is available on cable. Time Warner Cable Channel 528, IO Optimum Channel 505, RCN Channel 268, Bright House Channel 330, Verizon Fios Channel 900, Cox Cable Channel 1, Frontier Communications, and on Comcast in the on-demand menu under Premium Channels. For more information, visit tjctv.com.